So for today, it's going to be the ladder's finest tournament, where the top 16 ELO players face up against each other. I'm going to be joined with Dactor later today, and we'll be having a little bit of a longer tournament than usual, since there are indeed 4 rounds. All of them will be best of 3s. You can see all the players who have signed up, and there's even a few more who might be playing, depending on who drops out. So with that out of the way, we'll be jumping into the first game in just a second. So for the first game, O between Legion and Gobbo Slayer, going to be the Tomb Kings against the Dwarves. And for the Dwarf army, it's a very off-meta build. We're seeing Grombrindle still, the most meta Lord pick for the Dowie, aside from the Runesmith. 2 Master Engineers with their tier-shaped AoE attacks, I guess to kill off Tomb Guard. A bunch of miners, some of them not even without blasting charges. And really only the Irkund miners and 1 normal one with blasting charges is gonna be all the ranged that Gobbo Slayer has. The rest, well, aside from the engineers of course, but the rest is just dwarf warriors and longbeards. That's about it. A unit of dragonback slayers, as they are almost a must pick for most dwarf builds, but this is definitely a strange one for sure, Dactor. But before we get into any analysis, what do we have for the Tomb Kings?
So for the Tomb Kings, we have Archon the Black with Spirit Leech and Purple Son of Xerxes. Pretty standard here. We have a double Necrotech to top Chariots, a favorite of Legion. Also double Tomb Scorpion. We have Quad Carrion just for anti-gyrocopter play and to tie down non-existent ranged units because Gobbo Slayer's army is so weird. And we have a front line of 4 Skeleton Warriors with 4 Tomb Guard behind. So relatively straightforward rush army. I mean, I'd say this is fairly meta. I think definitely the dwarf build is a lot more, shall we say, interesting.
Yes, essentially the thing that is confusing both myself and Dactor is that this build essentially has no ways to kill off single entities aside from the Master Engineers and Grombrindle. Both of which aren't exactly specialists in that field. So we'll see how well they do. There is one, there's actually a unit of Iron Breakers, turns out, which is actually pretty significant. But the Master Engineers, if they can sit back and poke at the Tomb Scorpions for the whole game, that could be enough to actually kill off the single entities. Grombrindle could stay close to them to actually provide them support and keep them safe. And given how much infantry support there actually is in this army, it will actually be pretty hard shutting down this hero squad. It really just depends on whether or not they can do enough damage quickly enough.
Yeah, and just the existence of miners without blasting charges in this army is so weird as well. It's a unit you just don't really see. They're quite poor in combat. I mean, you pay another 125 gold, and you get a significantly stronger unit in Dwarf Warriors. So it's a little bit crazy to me, but we'll have to see how it works. I guess maybe the theory behind this army is that Tomb Kings really don't like a lot of infantry typically. It's often the way that Tomb Kings have a disadvantaged matchup is if they just get out infantryed hard, like against Counts, for example. So maybe he's just hoping that by taking this many infantry, the Tomb Kings can't deal with it, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, and the miners do provide a lot of mass too, so it almost guarantees for Gobbo Slayer that he doesn't have to worry about getting flanked in this situation. One of their main weaknesses, though, is that they do have pretty low leadership. Although in this case, with the Master Engineers nearby, they can go up to 77. which should keep them in the fight for quite a while. And they do have a pretty nice HP pool too, so we're expecting this fight to grind on for quite some time. The front line does engage for the Tomb Kings, and we'll see if Gobbo Slayer decides to commit any blasting charges to this engagement.
I would expect not. I think he'll probably want to save them for Tomb Guard. Tomb Guard, after all, are actually very low armor for an elite infantry unit. But at the same time, I mean, you could just nuke a Skeleton Warrior. Either one is okay, and it does look like the Ekron Miners are going to be firing in on top of some Skeleton Warriors, and they will be taking them down to half HP with just the first volley, so...
Yeah, and not to mention, there is actually pretty nice ammunition here, too. The Ekron Miners have quite a few charges. The Iron Breakers have twice as many as your usual miner unit. So, using a few charges on Skeleton Warriors will still leave you enough to hit up the Tomb Guard. But a nice summon on top of the Ekron Miners does shut them down.
Yeah, and Arkan, I mean, there isn't really much to threaten him, aside from, I suppose, the Master Engineers, but they're going to be busy firing at other targets. So Arkan should just be able to sit in combat and really enjoy this game and get off a lot of summons and get really high value with that. He also could use a Purple Sun onto the Iron Breakers or some of the other elite troops and get really good value that way, but instead he's actually choosing the Spirit Leech or Master Engineer, which is an interesting choice. I'm not sure it's one that I entirely agree with, but I suppose he will be working the Master Engineer down over the course of the game. And by the way, both Master Engineers are obstructed right now, which is really unfortunate, and as long as they're obstructed, there really isn't anything to threaten any of the high mass targets in this Tomb King army.
Yeah, it really depends on, I think, my theory is that Gobbo Slayer is planning to win the infantry fight in this situation. And once the Tomb Kings are out of infantry, it should be a pretty straightforward victory after that. And he might not need the Master Engineers. They both also still have their AoE attacks still, I think. So as soon as those go down, we'll see if there's actually enough forces here, since these Dragonback Slayers are actually strong enough where they could probably kill off both Tomb Scorpions.
Yeah, that's very true. I would think he wants to use the Scabscraths onto the Tomb Guard. But yeah, I'm not sure that we've seen them go down yet. It doesn't appear so. So we'll have to see. Now, it looks like Nushapti summon actually coming into the backline very early here, as the Tomb Kings are going to be going for a gooning attempt onto one of the Master Engineers. And yeah, that is definitely a very early Ushapti summon. Maybe a little bit premature, but the Tomb Kings have compromised a lot of this dwarf army, and they're in the rear of a lot of the dwarf infantry, so I suppose it's not a bad time.
Yeah, but what is definitely bad is that one of the Necrotechs does get flash bombed by Grombrindle, and he's going to be taking a ton of damage. Damage that he can't heal either. He will manage to escape, but not before getting about a third of his HP cleaved off.
Yeah, honestly, not that bad, all things considered. Also, Grombrindle is getting Spirit Leech now, which I think is a much better target than the Master Engineers for that spell. And by the way, the Master Engineers are obstructed again. I have no idea what he's trying to shoot at, but they are definitely not having a good time for whatever reason.
And a big Purple Sun too, now going to hit some Dwarf Warriors, but it actually catches some Tomb Guard too. Not too much damage on them though, and this will actually collapse the right flank of the Dowie. But the balance of power, looking like it's actually pretty Dowie favored now. A nice skeleton summon onto the Dragonback Slayers though is going to be really nice. That is the main anti-single entity for Grombrindle, and if they all die off, the Tomb Scorpions should have a field day.
Yeah, now one of the Master Engineers getting terrified. Definitely gonna want to chase that off. Now, it is worth noting that the Tomb Scorpions, with their mass, should have a pretty good time picking off these Master Engineers and also cycle charging Grombrindle in the late game, assuming they still have some infantry. And with Arkan's skeleton summons on demand, I can't imagine they won't have any infantry in the late game. Another Spirit Leech going down, again onto the Master Engineer. Actually, Legion not focusing a single target with the Spirit Leech, was spreading it out, and I'm not entirely sure I agree with that choice. I think it might be better suited to just Spirit Leech down Grombrindle, but he is relatively tanky, so I guess I can understand not wanting to waste all of everyone's magic on that.
Yeah, and, but one problem is though, with more Spirit Leeches coming down, there is a limited amount of Winds of Magic, and if we take a look at these Iron Breakers, they are basically at full HP, but the Tomb King's actually running out of infantry. That is a ton of mass that I think the Tomb Scorpions would probably get overly pinned down from.
Ooh, Grombrindal and the Dragonback Slayers are onto one of the Tomb Scorpions, and if he has Flash Bomb, this might be a huge pick.
Yeah, not to mention the Tomb Guard too. There is really just 2 units left of skeletons, and even if Ark in the Black does throw down a few more skeleton summons, I'm a little bit skeptical that it'll be enough heading up into the late game.
The Ironbreaker is getting a huge blasting charge, taking the Tomb Guard down. Like, they're losing half their HP just on the one blasting charge. Now they might go down right here. The Liber Mortis actually comes in and it's relatively clutch. It keeps the Tomb Guard up just a little bit longer, but I think the Master Engineer should still have Scab's Breath charges even if he needs them. And the balance of power is significantly in the Dwarf's favor, and the game state is even worse because once all of the infantry is gone, all the Tomb Kings are going to have is the Ark in the Black summons, and that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, especially now the Dragonback Slayers now in combat against single entities. The summon does go down, but it doesn't catch any of the Dragonback Slayers, and Grombrindal is still fairly supported. With all of this dwarf
taking a lot of damage though. If he can pick off Grombrindal, that might be a way back into the game, but he needs to get him out right now. He needs to use his Tomb Scorpions, kick him out of the blob, and then kill him.
Yeah, and that looks like exactly what Legion is going for now. But like we were talking about earlier, Grombrindal does have Unbreakable. So in a situation where he might have routed at this point, he will be continuing to hold and getting in a lot of damage onto these Tomb Scorpions. Those Dragonback Slayers too, even at very low HP, are going to be really helping this fight.
Yeah, now Grombrindal is definitely taking a ton of damage. Gabo Slayer wants to help him out as much as possible, and the Master Engineer is still obstructed. I have no idea what is up with the Master Engineers this game, but they are not having a good time. Grombrindal is very low HP now. He's under 600. However, I mean, I just don't know that there's enough, as the Skeleton Summon is going to wear down, and until Arkan has another one up, the Tomb Kings are going to be stuck in combat, and the Flash Bomb, a huge Flash Bomb coming down. This might be enough to pick off Arkan.
Ooh, but actually, attack.
Yeah, and actually Arkan somehow dodged the Flash Bomb. I have no idea how that happened. But yeah, ooh, big hits going down from Grombrindal at 59 HP.
Yeah, just barely survives, only to take another hit from the Tomb Scorpions, but at this point it actually might not matter. Grombrindal actually has secured Gabo Slayer has secured a very huge infantry advantage, and that's going to be it. Wow. Legion taps out just because there was a still basically full HP unit of Iron Breakers, and with just Ark in the Black and two Tomb Scorpions, that really wouldn't have been enough, not to mention the rest of the Dowry forces.
Yeah, what a wild build from Gabo Slayer. Ooh, the Dragonback Slayer's value is pretty nice there.
Oh, jeez. Almost paying for twice their value, but one of the strange things, though, are those Master Engineers. Although Legion spent a lot of resources actually focusing them, they didn't actually do very much there. I think if they had used their Scab's Breath like ability, they could have actually gotten some pretty nice damage up against the Tomb Guard. But in this case, I think Gabo Slayer might have done okay even without the Master Engineers, to be honest.
Yeah, they really didn't do much. He probably could have subbed them out for a Trollhammer or two, but it ended up working out just fine, so...
Yeah. And we can see one of the main predicaments for the Tomb Kings. Legion did spend about 2,000 gold worth of carrion that got almost no value, which is, it's really brutal hard countering something that doesn't actually show up.
Yeah.
Alrighty, but here we go. The second game between Legion and Gabo Slayer is going to be Vampire Counts versus the Lizardmen. Pretty interesting matchup that usually revolves around the Mortis engine, which looks to be what Legion has decided to bring this time around. it is going to be that plus a corpse cart, a single Vargle, 3 crypt horrors, some fellbats as flyers, and a pretty cheap front line with only a single unit of Graveguard, the rest just a mix of skeletons and zombies. So that will be losing to Saurus Warriors for sure without assistance. And for the hero squad, we're seeing Manfred along with 2 Banshees. Manfred coming in with the usual kit: Spirit Leech, Buna, Healing, and Summons. With that, Dactyr, what do we have for the Lizardmen?
Yeah, worth noting, by the way, it is Foot Manfred, which is, I don't think I've ever seen.
Oh.
Yeah, very interesting to see.
Yeah, usually you do see Vlad, but...
Yeah, so we, I guess we wanted the Buna and the Spirit Leech for some Umbled Hide, but... So, for Gobbo Slayer, we have a Slan of Life with Earthblood and actually Dweller's Blow, which for some reason has come into the meta recently. I'm not entirely convinced by it, but we'll see if it's used to good effect here. We have 2 Bastillodons with solar engines, 1 Dread Saurian, not the Feral variant or the Shredder of Lustria, but the actual just regular 3100 version, which does have the Howdah on its back that can do some really great damage over the course of the game. I think it's actually kind of an underrated unit. And then we have a triple Saurus Warrior, a Saurus Spear, and a Star Chamber Guardians pick, as well as the cohort of Sotek Red Crested Skink ROR, just to round out the army. So yeah, it's kind of a semi-blob build, but it's not entirely blobby. I think Legion has some decent tools to deal with this build, but he will have to keep his Mortis engine alive from the Dread Saurian for sure, or else he's gonna have a really bad time.
Yeah, not to mention the 2 solar engines too will make it pretty rough. And as for the frontline fight, the Crypt Horrors will be able to punch through the Saurus Warriors. And they also provide pretty decent mass too, so I expect those to come into play for actually defending that the Mortis engine. But I'm not sure. How do you feel about this frontline fight? Because there's not a lot in the form of flanking for Legion.
No, the frontline fight straight up will definitely go in Gobbo Slayer's favor. It'll be up to the Mortis engine basically to turn that on its head. And also, actually Buna onto the Star Chamber Guardians should be really effective. I think the Buna pick is cool here. I don't think you normally see it. Of course, counts usually like to use their Winds of Magic more on summons and heals. But in this particular instance, he should get some pretty good value with that spell.
Yeah, now some initial shots coming in onto the Fellbats. Not really a worthwhile trade if you're saving ammunition, but I think in this matchup, the solar engines usually don't run out of ammo. Still though, they have moved up now and are firing in on some different targets. One actually going towards the Mortis engine, but some dodging will allow it to make it to the front line without taking any damage, as long as Legion controls correctly. Another shot comes in, actually hitting the Crypt Horrors now, and takes out a model with that attack. So some pretty decent trades for the Lizardmen to start off with. The Howdah on the Dread Saurian is getting in some pretty good damage, but it's pretty minor for the vampire counts. A single heal will bring back those Crypt Horrors, and it will essentially come down to how well he shuts down these large single entities. Ooh, some shots now actually shooting into the Banshees and getting some pretty nice damage. The Banshees could be in a pretty rough time, and if they do get sniped out, that would be really bad for Legion.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh, man, another nice hit. Yeah, Solar Engine's doing magic damage. It is the only magic damage in this army, I believe. Oh, the Star Chamber Guardians as well. But of course, those are probably going to get buned. So actually, the Banshees could be a late game win condition once the Star Chamber Guardians are brought down. But yeah, man, huge damage onto them. Both getting hit there. And now the frontline engagement has started. The Mortis will come in, and I really think the Dread Saurian wants to try and match up against the Mortis. As much as possible, at least.
Yeah, except its attack animations push it a little bit too far into the zombies. But the big AoE coming on in The dwellers below actually hitting a few temple guard by the looks of it, but doing pretty good damage into all this, into all the vampire count's infantry.
Yeah, the Fate of Buna, actually, this is really cool. The damage resist are from the Slan Mage Priest going down as soon as the Fate of Buna goes down to mitigate the damage. You can see the Star Chamber Guardians actually still have half their HP, and they are going to get an Earthblood on top of them. No regrowth in this build is actually really weird, given that there's a Dread Saurian, so there's no burst heals. So I guess it's possible for the counts to drag down the Dread Saurian over time, but the fact that there's only really the Cryptors and the one Vargulf to do so, and the Vargulf is actually down to half HP, means that the counts might be in some trouble here.
Yeah, although that Mortis engine has been able to continue firing, or continue using its Mortis AoE effect for a while. The Vargulf is actually looking like he will be able to escape too, but one of the Banshees is crumbling away, and that's going to be one of the main tools for taking out this Dread Saurian going down in just a second.
Yeah, I mean, the Fate of Buna is a great pick. Ooh, he does actually have the Clutch Invocation. Okay, I was going to say, it's a cool pick, but it means that you don't have the heals you normally would. But the Invocation does come down, but that does mean also that there will be less zombie summons. However, I don't know that the zombie summons are as important in this particular build. There's nothing really to muck up. And what's most important is keeping this Mortis online, and actually it's still almost full HP. So the game is not going badly for the vampire counts right now. They just need to try and make sure that they keep their important pieces online, and they really need to start working down this Dread Saurian at some point.
Yeah, the Banshee's actually getting into position now. They're diving directly onto it, and there's no magic damage to actually support it. Dread Saurian actually has to flee, but at the same time it does block up the Mortis engine a bit. It's just that if it continues to run away from these Banshees, that Mortis will be able to get in most of its value, and single entities surrounded by infantry is a really bad situation for the Lizardmen. Not to mention the Vargulf actually still alive, Manfred is still in the fight too, and the single Bastiladon that has managed to escape is almost out of ammunition. And when that's gone, the Banshees are going to be an absolutely huge threat. The Slan Mage Priest is falling too, and it looks like the Vampire Counts might actually come out on top here.
Yeah, the Star Chamber Guardian's getting terror routed. I honestly can't believe they aren't ITP. And the Slan Mage Priest getting beaten up by this Vargulf. The Vargulf has just relentlessly been working down the Lizardman Lord. And if the Lord of the Lizardmen goes down, then there is pretty much no chance, I think, they'll be able to win this game. The Dread Saurian really trying to get over there, but it's getting staggered up by the Banshees, and it's getting bullied. Now, the Solar Engine gets a nice hit onto the Vargulf, but the Slan really needs to get some magic down quickly if he wants to win this game still.
Yeah, the goals for Gobbo Slayer right now is to snipe out those two Banshees with his Slan, use a Dread Saurian to kill off the Vargulf and the Mortis engine, and if he can pull that off, he's in a really good situation. But the Banshees, looking like they're not afraid of the Slan at all, are going to be chasing after it, and it looks like they will be able to kill it off, but at the cost of one of the Banshees.
Yeah, but that means that there's going to be no more healing for this Dread Saurian. And it's still relatively healthy, but, you know, that health will only go so far. Now, the Solar Engines are still online. They're getting really good damage into the Banshees. And this one Saurus Warrior still has most of its HP. It's certainly not over by any means. But I will say that the Counts have a pretty substantial advantage in this game at the moment. This Mortis Engine has just been able to sit and get so much value over the course of this game.
Yeah, and a very interesting point right now. The Slan is getting chased away by a crumbling Banshee, but just barely staying alive. Oh, but he goes down. It just depends on if that Banshee actually crumbles away now, because at this point, the Dread Saurian plus a couple Saurus Warriors is still a pretty significant threat. And the Vampire Counts are running out of forces themselves, especially if this Banshee dies. What is there really to kill off this Dread Saurian?
Foot Manfred, I guess. Foot Manfred does not have the most weapon strength. He does have Spirit Leeches. I cannot believe that I'm suggesting Spirit Leeching a Dread Saurian, but it might not be the worst idea, although probably better to use that magic on summons just to help drag it down. I don't know. The Vargolf is definitely the win condition right now.
Yeah,
it
if it
needs
gets
to be kept alive.
a few hits into the back.
Oh
of
man,
that
Manfred
sword.
getting wrecked.
Oh my goodness! I looked away for 1 second, and now all of a sudden
He's down
a
to
quarter
he is
HP.
losing all of his HP. Dude, what is it? I mean, Vampire Counts Footlords, man. Never take them. Look at they have had the worst record in these tournaments, and Manfred goes down.
Oh
See ya.
jeez! So
Wow.
just a couple
Okay.
hits from that Dreadsaurian, just completely swinging the game back in the direction of the Lizardmen. Just absolutely brutal. Oh my goodness, definitely pretty unexpected, as Manfred was diving in straight towards the Dreadsaurian, but if you look at its melee attack, it is all the way up at 57, which actually makes it a bit surprising that it managed to land so many hits back to back.
Yeah, man, this Dreadsaurian's just solo carrying the game. You love to see it. Dreadsaurian's definitely one of the coolest units, and man, there's nothing to kill this Dreadsaurian at this point. And there's even actually a few Saurus warriors that have come back that Gobbo Slayer either hasn't noticed or just feels he doesn't need. It's about to be army losses for the Vampire Counts, and there it goes. Whew, that game turned fast.
Yep, first we saw the Rogue Idol, now it's a Dreadsaurian coming in to win the day. Wow, things were going pretty well for the Vampire Counts. We did mention that the Dreadsaurian, geez, was 6,000 damage value. We did mention it was a pretty big threat, and I really think that the really nice solar engine play to snipe out the Banshees was really what did it there. The Banshees could have been a really big pain for the Dreadsaurian to actually shut down, thanks to their high melee defense. But after they were down, there weren't too many threats, and apparently Manfred really just does not stack up well against the Dreadsaurian. I'm quite surprised about that, and the combination between the Saurian and the two other dinos amounts to about 3/4 of the Vampire Count's army worth of value. They're definitely paying for themselves, and a very interesting, or maybe not a crazy build for Gobbo Slayer, but well executed and played well enough to beat out Legion's main. So that's going to be it, and Gobbo Slayer will be moving on to the next round. I guess I'll go over the Lizardmen side this time, and also in tournament news, Flying Taco is out. Sadly, we wanted to catch his game, but looks like Hall Harmon coming in with the 2-0 victory there. Pretty interesting.
Hall Harmon, definitely one of the top players right now. He's been having a ton of success, so it is not terribly shocking. But yeah, still very impressive stuff. Him taking out the last ECL champion.
Yeah, and 2-0 nonetheless, but for this game, it is Owie Dowie against the Spud House, Lizardmen against the Dowie, and for the Lizardmen side, we are seeing a bit of a rush build, although with a lot of skirmishers too. It's a little bit strange. These skirmishers, of course, Chameleon Skinks are very good against gyrocopters though, but I think in this matchup, it's more common to see the Pterodon Riders, as their rock drops will help a lot more versus infantry. There is also a Skink Chief on the battlefield. He doesn't have too many uses in a rush, but is actually pretty good at kiting down single entities in the late game if it does come down to it. And the rest of the army is going to be red-crested skinks, of course, with their AP, skink cohorts to flank around and kill range units, or at least bog them down, and 2 feral stegodons to actually punch through that front line. Also, there's a rogue tic-tac-toe too, and a skink priest of beasts for the main hero core here. A very strange Lizardmen build, a little bit off meta, but it definitely has some teeth and can function in many situations. So with that, what do we have for the Dowie build?
So the Dowie are coming in with Grom Brindal, it looks like triple Thunderer, double regular Iron Drake actually. No Trollhammer Torpedoes is a bit off meta here, but not terribly so. And I know regular Iron Drakes are used with some frequency here by Dali mains, just to roast through skinks. Then we have, it looks like, a front line of 3 Longbeards, 2 Dwarf Warriors, 3 Dwarf Warriors, sorry, and then 2 Miners with Blasting Charges and 2 Slayers, including the Dragonback Slayers, as the sort of anti-mobility core. So it's a pretty standard-ish dwarf army versus, like you said, a somewhat off meta, but not terribly so Lizardmen. So
Yeah, it has like a few points of interest, quite a few points of interest actually for the Lizardmen build, but the core of it is basically the same. The idea is that these skin cohorts will come into the back and trade into these Slayers, as they are much cheaper and will get in a pretty decent amount of damage. And the counterplay from the dwarves are these miners with blasting charges. Essentially, they'll be used to kill off as many skinks as possible before bogging them down as a decent fighting infantry unit. The Thunderers, though, will have to be a little bit wary against the double Stegodons, but if they charge in too quickly, we would both be expecting the Slayers to do pretty well in that situation.
yeah, the cannon is not having a good time, I think, just because of the terrain on this map. It's a little bit, what would you say? There's a bit of a hill, there's a bit of a slope, so the cannon is having a little bit of difficulty firing in maybe, but it is hitting the Stegodon a few times and getting some okay-ish damage, and it's fulfilling the attacking rule, so there's some value in that as well.
Yeah, but the real question though is it will either need to pay for itself, or well, it also forces the Lizardmen to engage faster, and that also it allows it cuts off their time a bit. Otherwise, if you didn't have the cannon, you would see the Lizardmen positioning for basically a perfect engagement, and that would usually be pretty bad for your defensive formations.
Well, you say that, but they've got the full surround. I can't imagine it getting too much better than that.
Oh, but a
lot of
rampage
this
on the Stegodon.
Oh wow, that shouldn't be a big deal. He should just immediately be able to use cold-blooded on it. But
Yep,
it is taking
tic-tac-toe,
huge damage. No cold-blooded yet.
Tic-tac-toe's cold-blooded actually is an AoE ability and cannot be targeted on the
Yeah, but
Stegodon
there's a
at
skink
range.
priest of beasts right there.
Oh,
No.
That's true. I missed that. Actually, instead just opting for that straight up engage, and the fight is on. Maybe a little bit at a bad time. That Fail Stegodon gets nuked down.
Yeah, and the Iron Drakes are getting massive damage onto the red crested skinks. Really nice stuff there. The other Iron Drake actually has a really poor firing line, so the dwarves will need to adjust that. And the one flank is going really well for the dwarves, but the other flank, the Stegodon has gotten onto the Iron Drakes, and some red crested skinks are getting onto Thunderers, so it's not all bad for the Lizardmen right now. But certainly, I would say that the start of this battle seems like it's going in the dwarf favor. A Manticore summon does go down. This could be nice. He could shut down a Thunderer unit or some Iron Drakes. Indeed, it looks like he'll go after an Iron Drake unit. But that will be getting peeled off with some Longbeards. And also, the Skink Priest of Beasts actually goes down to Grombrindal. He'll probably come back and be able to get his second Feral Manticore summon off. But that is still really nice. And Tic-Tac-Toe also going down on the other side of that formation means that all of the leadership for the Lizardmen is kind of buckling right now.
Yeah, however, they both do manage to come back. It does, and it looks like it actually doesn't cause any routes in the Lizardmen formation. So far, their infantry is making a pretty good job, except actually, the infantry shutting down the Thunderers get routed off, and that is almost an instant focus fire on the Stegodon as soon as they are able to fire again, which brings down the single entities for the Lizardmen. Essentially, it's just one Manticore summon left, and that's a pretty scary position to be in. You need your large monsters to punish the Dwarven range units, and the fact that they're still firing is pretty bad. We'll see if they actually get shut down as we progress into the later stages of this game. But how do you feel about this situation, Doctor?
Well, the balance of power looks even. I don't know. The game state feels like it's in the favor of the dwarves, but I don't know. I suppose the Slayers are dying, but there's not really much they need to kill anymore. I guess it comes down to this second Manticore summon. If it can kill uh, both Iron Drake units, then I think that might be enough for the Lizardmen to grind down the remaining dwarf forces. But yeah, the one Iron Drake unit is actually getting chased down by Chameleon Skinks. The Chameleon Skinks, you kind of question the pick, but look at the ridiculous value they're getting. Uh, at least Chevrons, they are doing extremely well, and they are shutting down the Iron Drakes. They're probably going to rout them off, and the Dwarf formation is kind of starting to collapse on that flank.
Yeah, with the dwarves actually running out of infantry, this could be pretty bad. The Skink Chief, too, at pretty high ammunition, has more than enough to kill off Grombrindle in the late game. And it really depends on how well these Longbeards hold. The left flank of the right flank of the dwarves has actually recovered now. There are quite a few Thunderers back in the fight. As for the Slayers, on the left flank of the dwarves, they are all gone. And I'd be sort of worried as the dwarves that this could just transition into a skirmish game heading into the late game.
Yeah, the Chameleon Skinks are getting on top of the Thunderers with Tic-Tac-Toe, and they're shutting those Thunderers down. Now, the Thunderers need to shoot the Powhawk Sentinels, and I guess they could probably shoot Tic-Tac-Toe. But honestly, the bigger problem is just look at all of this Lizardmen infantry. Their infantry is so healthy. The Iron Drakes are shut down, and the dwarves are really relying on those Iron Drakes to win them the infantry fight. Without them, they're just kind of falling apart.
Yeah, the main problem is that the red-crested skinks with their AP will eventually be able to tear down basically all of these Longbeards. But I'm not entirely sure. A lot of the income for the Lizardmen are just skink cohorts, and Grombrindle is still healthy too, so a single misplay with Tic-Tac-Toe could actually get his lord sniped out. And Grombrindle he's going to be a little bit of a tough target to take down. Still though, there are a lot of Lizardmen forces, there's still a lot of ammunition, and another break from the Dowie infantry is going to be pretty big. The dwarves are getting routed off, or the dwarf warriors are getting routed off, the thunderers are gone, and it's basically just the 3 units of Longbeards left. So it'll come down to how well they actually hold here.
Yeah, the balance of power is actually dead even. I guess some dwarf units are actually coming back. Some Longbeards are relatively healthy. There are some dwarf warriors in the corner who probably won't have much of an impact, but they could do something. An Iron Drake unit will probably not do anything, and it will indeed shatter. So, I don't know. I definitely like the state of the game for the Lizardmen right now. I don't think Grombrindle is going to be able to, carry this game out. He's not that kind of lord. But we'll have to see. There isn't a ton of single entity killing power actually on the Lizardmen side, as they've used most of their ammo, and what units they do have are not super high burst damage targets. It's mostly things like red crested skinks and out of ammo chameleons, or nearly out of ammo chameleons. But actually, the Skink Chief just firing in over the course of the game should get some good damage as well, so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and he still has actually quite a bit of ammunition, but most of the Lizardmen forces are actually getting pretty low on HP now. Their leadership is wavering, and a rogue pick on Tic-Tac-Toe could really ruin things. I think if Tic-Tac-Toe dies here, that is a loss for the Lizardmen, but diving into the Longbeards on the side, helping rout them off, is going to be really good. It's just, and yeah, at this point, it's just a few stray dwarf units. The balance of power is very high in the favor for the dwarves because of Grombrindle, but he's going to run the risk of getting sniped down by the Skink Chief. It does have 30 ammunition left, so that will likely be enough to kill him, and that's a pretty bad sign. At this point, I think the Lizardmen do have the victory here.
Yeah, it's only about 30 to 40 damage per hit with that Skink Chief, but I mean, there's just so much ammo that over time it will be doing significant damage. And yeah, I don't know. With a full surround, Grumbrindle does not do well into full surrounds of infantry. Um, and that's exactly what the Lizardmen are going to have. And they're going to have a lot of infantry for that full surround as well. Now, one Iron Drake is actually coming back. If they manage to get off like the God Volley, then maybe. Um, but I don't see it happening, and they will shatter. And yeah, I definitely think the Lizardmen shouldn't have too much trouble closing this game out from here.
Yeah, they do. They don't have any Saurus warriors. Really, the main punching power are these red-crested skinks plus the skink chief. Grombrindle is desperately trying to get into combat to avoid all those darts being shot at him, but he's already lost about a quarter of his HP. And Tic-Tac-Toe actually painting some dives into Grombrindle, but surely Owie Dowie does not want to get into melee combat with Tic-Tac-Toe at this point.
No, he's playing very smart. He's picking off the straggling units. He's actually completely ignoring Grumbrindle for now, not giving him anything. And yeah, Grumbrindle is down to 3,600 HP. It should be probably closer to 3,000 or even lower by the time the main engagement starts. And I just don't see him being able to kill all of this Lizardman infantry. I mean, it is so much. He does not really have great splash with his melee attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll have to see though.
Some interesting play too. He could actually use the unkillable ability on the red-crested skinks, just waiting for the infantry to fight Grombrindle while the cooldown resets, and then diving in onto him afterwards to make sure that he doesn't lose models there. Would actually work out pretty well, and that seems to be the intention, as Grombrindle just continues to get kited out by these skinks.
That would be some huge brain plays. We are about to see the Lizardmen run out of ammo. Honestly, I might be tempted to save some poison, but I guess the weapon strength shouldn't be too relevant, just given that Grombrindle will be able to one-shot pretty much anything left on this Lizardman army.
Yeah, and actually taking out quite a few of those red-crested skinks too. But there we go. There's the unkillable ability on them now. And Grombrindle's attacks will be mostly wasted on those skinks. Or actually, I think that might have been a flash bomb instead. All of the troops now clumping up onto Grombrindle. Tic-Tac-Toe actually getting a charge in and manages not to get hit. And this could still go either way. Grombrindle is unbreakable, but now we're seeing the leadership of the Lizardmen spike up pretty significantly, and I wouldn't expect them to rout off too much.
Yeah, and I think he just needs, I think Grombrindle needs a lucky hit onto Tic-Tac-Toe, but Tic-Tac-Toe is cycle charging. He's actually quite effective here. He's getting some good hits in and getting out pretty much immediately, and even pushing around Grombrindle, kind of slim locking him, making sure that he can't fight back. Now this might be a hit onto Tic-Tac-Toe here, but again, he's going to push through relatively effectively. And I don't know, I just don't see Grombrindle wearing down this entire Lizardman force.
Yeah, and the cycle charges have actually proven pretty effective. Tic-Tac-Toe not taking any hits. But if he does die, I would expect a few of these chameleon skinks to rout off. There is still the big problem, though, that Grombrindle comes in at 125 armor, and there's not a ton of AP here except for Tic-Tac-Toe, which lands again. And will he take a big hit here? That could decide everything. And it looks like he manages to
deliver the big hit and get back out again, man.
Yeah, still it gets riskier and riskier each time he comes in, and another flash bomb would really ruin things here. But
yeah,
army losses for the dwarves could give a little bit of a leadership debuff for the Lizardmen. Flash bomb comes in, and will Tic-Tac-Toe goes down. Instead, he actually hits Grombrindle with that huge charge bonus, and it looks like that's going to be it. Some nice cycle charging from Tic-Tac-Toe, just barely keeping him alive and providing the AP that was needed to actually finish off Grombrindle.
Yeah, pretty impressive stuff. A great use of the skirmish tools on the Lizardmen, those chameleon skinks especially getting some great value in. The Stegodon's kind of thrown away at the start of the game, but in the end, it doesn't really matter. The Skink Chief also getting huge damage. almost 900 damage on a 350 cost unit. Of course, the Skink Chief, well known and kind of notorious, is one of the most cost efficient anythings in the game. But still, getting that much value from it is quite impressive, and it's rare to see the Skink Chief use 100% of its ammo.
Yeah, now while the Longbeards did manage to get their value that game, trading out pretty well against the red-crested skinks just due to their high melee defense, they weren't really able to defend the Iron Drakes in the end. Same with the Slayers, they ended up getting shut down by skinks, and that ended up being enough to pull out the win for the Lizardmen despite the Stegodon losses. So for the next match, it is Empire against the Lizardmen. Owie Dowie up one game. We'll see if he can win a 2-0 victory here with his Empire army of War Wagons. That is definitely the most interesting pick here. Only second to the Templehof Luminarch, an extremely heavy hitter at 1,400 damage averaged. Wolfheart 2, it's gonna be a net and snipe build with this army. A lot of these forces will be relatively hard to shut down too, since he is coming in with a ton of infantry, which is almost standard for Empire in the current meta, and a Bright Wizard with Fireball, presumably for some snipes too, and also, specifically I think, for that bonus 22% damage
Yeah, that's
to
what
fire.
I was gonna say too. The Kindle Flame synergy with the Templehof Luminarch,
Flaming
definitely
Sword
very
of Ruin.
strong.
Oh. Yeah, Flaming Sword of Ruin too. It's a lot of buffs. He really wants to snipe something out. So, with that pretty interesting army out of the way, what do we have for the Lizardmen?
Well, he doesn't actually have the most to snipe. He does have a few targets. So we have a Saurus Oldblood coming in on top of a Carnosaur. This is kind of like the old style of Lizardmen play here, I think, where you went with a relatively expensive lord to try and counter Karl Franz. Obviously not going to be running into that. So the Saurus Oldblood will probably have a really hard time, actually. We will see a Skink Priest of Beasts with Manticore Summons and Flock of Doom. We have double Feral Bastillodon, which are really actually cheap monsters. So even though they look big and expensive, if that's the only thing the Empire is able to snipe, they will not have a good time. We then have, it looks like, is it just 3 Cold One Riders, which are very strong against Empire. A few Skink cohorts with Javelins, 4 in total. 4 Saurus Warriors with shields. And it looks like just 1 Pterodon Riders, with the Fire Leech Bolus, which is definitely not very common. Cool to see. Now we're actually seeing a huge snipe attempt onto this Feral Bastillodon. The Templehof Luminarch, an Amber Bow, going to be killing it pretty much immediately. But again, it's only a 650 cost unit. So if that's the most that the Empire is able to snipe for this portion of the game, I think the Lizardmen will be quite happy.
Yeah, especially with that Saurus Oldblood coming in along the flank. It is important to note he does have a 66% ward save ability. So if he does get netted down, he will be able to survive against a crazy focus fire. And even though the Bastillodon is pretty cheap, I'm wondering if that Terror will be needed coming into the late game. This right flank of the Empire no longer really has to worry about that really getting collapsed too quickly. And now it looks like they're focusing their efforts on sniping out that Saurus Oldblood.
Yeah, the Templehof misses its first shot. It's kind of an easy to dodge piece at times. Actually, oftentimes just running in a straight line will dodge the Templehof's shots, but we'll have to see if Spudhouse is on top of his game there. Now, another shot looks like it might be coming in just a moment, as the Saurus Oldblood is actually stopped right now, so there's a decent chance that the Templehof Luminarch might be able to hit him. But actually, the Templehof Luminarch instead turning to face the Feral Bastillodon, and it does look like a Fireball, a Net, and is it? No, actually no Fireball, but yeah, the Templehof Luminarch uses its Net, fires in onto the Bastillodon, and together with Wolfheart will do a ton of damage. But actually, the Saurus Oldblood going in balls deep. Another Net going down, but he should have the damage resistance ability here. Really nice Net though, definitely. going to be stopping this sniping attempt on the right wizard. But yeah, the Amulet of Itzel really clutch here. Stops it from being pretty much one-shot, as it might have been. And a fireball going down, doing a lot of damage to both sides, actually. Maybe even more to the Empire initially, but a nice second wind into the Saurus does a ton of damage. And man, this game has gotten chaotic very quickly.
Yeah, the left flank of the Empire has now collapsed, and it's on the Saurus Oldblood to try and push through into the center now. The Basildons are coming back too. They may cause some terror routes, but the Saurus Oldblood is taking a ton of damage from Wolfheart. It looks like he might even get routed off, and that would be extremely bad, but there's still a lot of Lizardmen infantry, and they run the threat of overwhelming the Empire forces here.
Yeah, the Templeoff Luminarch is finally starting to get compromised, as well as the War Wagons. And it's possible that the Lizardmen, if they're able to keep the Saurus Oldblood alive... Ooh, okay. The Wolfheart ability going down. Will it hit?
Oh, and it gets fired. Oh my
goodness. It never hits.
Wolfheart.
Okay, a fireball going down, though, will be huge, actually. It'll roast a ton of Skinks, Coldon Riders, and Saurus. Really nice cast there. But yeah, the front line for the Empire is starting to collapse, and the War Wagons are getting compromised. The Templeoff Luminarch is about to rout, and it looks like the Lizardmen might be pulling ahead in this game as another Feral Manticore summon goes down, and it should be able to bully these War Wagons and Wolfheart quite effectively.
Yeah, essentially, the Empire really focused on the single entities, but their infantry really did not hold up. The cavalry charges plus the Saurus warriors overran all of the pretty cheap infantry, and given that the Saurus Oldblood did manage to survive, the leadership of all these troops is going to be holding up really strong. And even though there were some really nice sniping attempts, and even though they did hit their marks, just the lack of anti-infantry really didn't help out.
Yeah, the entire army gets netted all at once. The Templeoff Luminarch might come back, but I just don't see it doing enough into all of this infantry. We'll see though. The balance of it's not completely lost yet for the Empire. It's looking very bad, but it's not completely lost. Ooh, another Manticore summon goes down though, and that's going to be rough. Army losses are practically on the table here, and we are actually quite close to the edge of the map. I didn't recognize that until now.
Yes, me neither, but
I don't think it was. It would have been a rule break, but it would have maybe warranted a check on the replay had the Empire won this game. But it looks like the Lizardmen are going to go ahead and carry the day here. Yeah, it's really weird actually to see this build from the Empire in this matchup, because in this matchup in particular, the meta right now does not favor sniping builds whatsoever. I mean, the meta is literally go with the cheapest Lord you possibly can and go as wide as you possibly can. So there's not really going to be good targets for the Empire to snipe most of the time. Honestly, the Saurus Oldblood was almost like a perfect situation that got brought for the Empire, because that is at least a high value target you can snipe, but not able to quite kill it off thanks to the Amulet of Itzel, really showing why that ability is so good. And yeah, it looks like it's just going to be cleanup now for the Lizardmen.
Yeah, this build seemed to really rely on those burning heads to win out the infantry fight, but against Saurus warriors, burning head actually isn't as effective as you might hope. There's just so many of them, and they're decently high armor too. Will usually keep them fairly safe. You won't kill off all of them, and they'll still have enough HP to run over your front line. And there we go, a few more nets coming on down to save the Luminarch. But that's not really going to be enough. It may get a shot off on the Saurus Oldblood, but with it now surrounded by cavalry, it should be going down. Marcus too won't be able to get any shots, as he is getting swarmed by the Skinks with javelins. And that looks like it should be army losses now. Actually, yes, taking a while to kick in, but
yeah, it's actually surprising that it hasn't yet. There we go. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange because you're bringing, let's see, it would be about 3,500 plus all of your magic. So about 4,000 gold and all of your magic investment is basically into sniping out monsters that cost 650 gold.
Yeah, and we really see the effect of that. The Luminarch, despite landing most of its hits, only got a 1,200 damage value. That's actually surprisingly low for a Luminarch. Marcus too, only 900 value, and that really says a lot here. Given that they were trying to snipe out the monsters, in the end, it really was just the Bastiladons that they were killing.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's meta to bring Marcus here now, I think, and a lot of infantry. I'm not entirely convinced by it, actually. I've played it a bit, and it does seem to run into this problem where it can just get overwhelmed by a super wide army. I don't know. It's a matchup that Empire really doesn't like lately. It feels like. I don't know. I haven't seen a Franz Demi-Blob here in a long time, even though in theory you would still think that might be the strongest sort of play style. But I guess if you do that, then you run into solar engines, and that can be quite rough as well. So
yeah, really all about that meta and which builds you decide to bring, at least in this case.
I'm being selfish here. This build is so weird. All right, so we have a Rune Lord coming in with his standard runes. We have a Thane, which makes a lot of sense. We have two gyrocopters and the Skyhammer Gyro Bomber ROR, which you normally do not see. Definitely a cool pick. We then see a couple of cannons, some miners with blasting charges, the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, a regular miner, and then we have. Okay, I've seen this. I've seen this theory crafted, not in this exact way, not in this exact build, but I've seen this idea. A front line of Iron Drakes. 5 Iron Drakes regular in the front line. Nothing else. Yeah, these things will absolutely ruin Death Runners if they're allowed to get a volley into them, which is why you bring them. But what do the Skaven have?
Well, for the Skaven, it is going to be looking pretty standard. You have the Plague Priest for summons up against Slayers. You have Poison Wind Globadiers instead of Mortars, since Dowie do bring a lot of artillery nowadays. And something that is off meta is going to be Ikit Claw and the Wheels of Doom, ROR Doom Wheel. An interesting pick, but still very nice for a rush. They are a chariot unit, and chariots are quite strong against dwarves, as are these Doom Flayers ROR, which are extremely strong, even called the Dwarf Thing Menace for their anti-armor capabilities. The Jezzails too are going to be a bit of a problem, and the rest is just a standard front line, with a few Wolf Rats just to chase off dwarf units.
Okay, I think the Skaven are in trouble from the deployment right away. The Jezzails are going to get fired on by cannons right now, and if they die, then the gyrocopters are going to run free and just kill everything. The Skaven needs to be very careful here. I'm not actually sure. They kind of put themselves into a hole by deploying this close with their Jezzails. They need to find some way to protect them. They need to, I think, just rush forward and try and compromise the cannons as quickly as possible. The gyrocopters are actually being relatively impatient here, and they're going immediately under the Jezzails. They might get some decent damage here. There's no Howling Warpgale, actually. Oh, there is. Okay, the Howling Warpgale comes down. And actually, the Doom Wheels are shooting up and taking out gyrocopters, too, which is something that I never expected to see. Doom Wheels are not normally seen here, but it actually makes some sense, I guess, just because they have high mass, they have good armor-piercing anti-infantry, and they can shoot up, which I never would have thought. But yeah, this is actually... Okay, so this is really cool. As the front lines are clashing, but the gyrocopters did go in on the flank just to turn the Jezzails towards them, so that way the cannons could fire down their flank and get extra damage in. But I don't know, the one gyrocopter goes down, the Skyhammer is low, and the Skaven are rapidly collapsing in towards this front line, and there is nothing to deal with these Doom Wheels and Doom Flayers. The Doom Flayers are just running in completely balls of the wall and going through the Iron Drakes right now. They need to get onto the cannons, but once they do, there's nothing left to actually shut them down.
Yeah, and this is one of the main problems with this build. It focuses heavily on the Air Force to shut down the chariots, but the Air Force was focused on the Giselles, as that is a main priority. And now that they've actually gone taken out, these chariots are going to be doing a lot of damage. Some gyrocopters are still alive, but they are just a
Ooh,
steam
yeah, the one
gyros.
gyrocopter is it's getting some decent damage with the cannons and the hero squad onto Ikit, but man, he needs to take out Ikit rapidly if he wants to win this game. He needs a Lord Snipe. Now, one Giselle did shatter, and the other one is, man, it's online. It's firing in, no problem. A Master Rune of Negation onto the gyrocopter is such a cool play. It'll keep it online a little bit longer, and the Thane is bullying Ikit, but I think the Skaven are still doing quite well here. As long as the gyrocopters are shut down, but the gyrocopters honestly are not doing too bad. Man, it's really sketchy right now because Ikit is kind of low. He's at a quarter HP, and despite what you might think, Doom Wheels don't have that great of a time against Dawi. But with that being said, the Skaven are going well ahead on the balance of power, and as long as the gyrocopters are shut down, I think they have no problems at all swarming the rest of this build.
I think so. If you look at the gyrocopters, they are just the steam gyros, and I don't think there's anything left that can actually do damage to these chariots at this point. Now that the cannons are actually down. If I'm correct, I think all the gyrocopters are just steam gyros, right?
Yeah, it looks like it, and one gyrocopter is going to be going down. The other one should soon follow. One of the Giselles manages to stay on line. And honestly, that's what this matchup comes down to most of the time, is whether or not the Giselles can get shut down. And in this case, the Dawi really went all in at the very start of the battle. They threw their gyros right in there, but it wasn't quite enough. I think, honestly, the biggest error for the Dawi was sending their gyros in. Probably should have kept them in reserve and used the cannons to pick off the Giselle models where they could, while the gyrocopters hung back and tried to snipe out Ikit and the other chariots. But it's definitely a hard matchup, and honestly, all things considered, I think the Spud House had a really good build to deal with Aoi Dawi.
Yeah, essentially, I think that ROR, I think the gyros could have swapped positions probably. The steam ones could have pressured the Giselles, with the ROR killing the chariots. But there were quite a few threats up against the Spud House. There were actually a pretty high number of chariot units, so his front line was almost guaranteed to get collapsed in on, given that there was Ikit, the ROR Doomwheel, and the Dwarf Thing Menace. It was pretty tough, but a pretty good fight nonetheless. Taking out one of the Giselle units, crushing the chariots, I think maybe even killing Ikit Claw, but that won't be enough as the Skaven managed to come out on top in that match.
Yeah, and how unfortunate that this is like the one time the Skaven don't bring any Death Runners when he has 5 Iron Drakes just to kill Death Runners. I mean, definitely unfortunate on Aoi Dawi's side. But yeah, I mean, whenever you pick this matchup, you're taking a huge risk. You're basically betting that the opponent doesn't know how to play it. And Spudhouse certainly knew how to play it, at least well enough to take the victory here. So well played to him. He'll be heading to the semifinal. And yeah, so that's very exciting.
Sure, go ahead. Take it away with Bretonia.
So we do see Lewin Landker coming in with his full kit, as is typically expected. We see a Damsel of Life with Earthblood and Regrowth this time. No more Dwellers Below experiments for today. We have, it looks like, 3 questing knights, including the Companions of Canel, with 2 Knights of the Realm to round out the cavalry force. We have 5 Peasant Mob, 5 Men-at-Arms with shields or Spear Men-at-Arms, 3 Peasant Bowmen, including just 1 with Pox arrows. So a relatively straightforward rush build, and actually no trebuchets. It's quite interesting. Would you like to go over the Empire side?
Well, for the Empire side, it's going to be actually almost a literal box formation, going for those nice 90-degree angles and using a little bit of terrain to actually reinforce the flanks. For the artillery, it will be 2 great cannons to snipe out the questing knights, presumably, and actually a bit of a skirmisher core. 3 units of Pistoliers will be nice as long as they're not getting pressured by the Peasant Bowmen. The counter to Lewin and the Damsel gonna be Karl Franz with his not his full kit, but all of his buffs, and the Jade Wizard also with no dwellers below shenanigans. Some Demogryph Knights Halberd variant in the back line too, to charge into the sides of the Bretonians. Should be pretty effective in this situation since they don't have to worry about trebuchets. So, how do you feel about these two builds, Actor?
Well, I'm a little bit concerned for the Empire that the Peasant Bowman will just kind of walk up and shoot him in the face. There isn't much in the way of anti-Peasant Bowman tech here. There are no mortars. He's in a defensive formation. There's no Volkmark or banishments. There's no Burning Head. There's really nothing actually at all to take out any Peasant Bowmen. So they should have relatively free reign. And with that, the Empire is kind of on a timer here, which they don't want to be in this sort of build. Obviously, with a defensive build, ideally you're forcing your opponent towards you. But the Bretonians, once they shoot the cannons to death, should have a pretty good time here. With that being said, the Pistoliers don't have a lot to counter them, and no trebuchets means the Demogryph Knights are also quite happy. So it could go either way, but I do kind of favor the Bretonians here.
At least for the Empire, there are only 3 units of Peasant Bowmen, but I think you're correct. There is basically nothing to shut them down. The Jade Wizard does have the Awakening of the Wood, though. Do you think that can rout them off?
No, it doesn't do that much damage, unfortunately. It's great for the slowing effect, and it can do a little bit of chip damage, but it's not like a Burning Head type ability or something that can do substantial damage to a Peasant Bowman and rout one off. Now, the Pistoliers are not very happy right now. They're shooting into peasant mobs. They're pretty much completely unable to find a good firing position. They are actually getting a couple volleys into Peasant Bowmen, which could be a potential way, I guess, to get some damage onto those units. But overall, the Bretonians are advancing, and they're definitely not doing it for free. They're taking some substantial losses on their questing knights from the cannons, but they're not taking so much damage that they're in trouble by any means.
Yeah, a few peasant deaths is definitely no skin off the Bretonians' backs. And here we go, like you said, those archers are now getting free reign, actually getting in pretty good damage against those Demogryph Knights.
Yeah, and also one of the cannons is obstructed. I don't know how long it's been obstructed for, but it isn't firing, which is definitely unfortunate for it. Now, Franz is getting some decent chip damage here, but now he's being chased by Lewin. And this is definitely a dangerous situation. Lewin and Franz, I mean, if one decisively wins the single combat, it will decide the game. And Lewin is surrounding Franz with all of these knights. It's definitely an advantage situation for the Bretonians, and Franz is going down very, very quickly. He needs to get a regrowth, and he needs to assist him right now.
Yeah, but the Demogryphs actually are pretty low coming into this combat. And it looks like Franz will just barely be able to escape. And actually, a few of these questing knights do get taken down during that fight, but definitely very huge losses on Franz's HP.
Definitely, and some cannons coming into melee here, unfortunately, as they seem to either be targeting something they shouldn't be, or they are having some problems getting a firing line. Now, I don't know, I don't think a regrowth has come in yet. I don't know if he doesn't have the Winds of Magic or what, but he needs to throw down a regrowth right now if he wants to keep Franz alive and stay in this game.
And one way the Spud House can also pull back too is if he can take out all of the cavalry for Bretonia, his Demogryph Knight advantage should be able to pull out pretty well. But given that Franz is about to actually get chased off by Lewin, and his Demogryph Knights do get countercharged, it's gonna look pretty rough. Franz emergency lands on the ground, but a charge attack puts him in the perfect position for Lewin to take out, and it seems like this is probably going to be it.
Yeah, if Franz can stabilize here, turn and kill Lewin with the Demogryph Knights, then it'll be enough to bring the Empire back in the game, and this regrowth is quite huge. And actually, Lewin is kind of surrounded, but some archer fire in the back of Franz, and actually Lewin is slipping out, popping Foe Seeker, and with that, I think he has escaped that very dangerous situation. Now, Franz has some HP now. The Empire isn't doing too poorly, actually, except for the leadership fight. But yeah, Lewin getting such better charges pretty much this entire game has been so punishing for the Empire player.
Indeed, and one very important note now that Lewin has actually escaped. He is very far away from his heal cap, while Franz is.
Ooh, Franz is going in on top
now.
of him, actually.
But yeah, going in for that final duel against
Ooh, and he's
Lewin.
getting some really nice hits in too. Now Franz needs to get out right here before the support comes in. But actually, that's some really nice chip damage that will. It won't even the leadership fight out by any means, but it'll start to make it a bit more fair. And also a really nice countercharge with Demogryphs, and also some Spearmen and Halberds coming into this cav fight here could be quite decisive.
Yeah, he actually baited out all that cavalry to come into the fight, but Lewin comes in, and if he kills off Franz, it will all be for nothing.
Yeah, but oh man, this is a great engagement for the Empire right now. And actually, Lewin missing a couple of hits in a row onto the debuffed Franz with 14 melee defense, dodging out the 56 melee attack of Lewin is pretty insane. And man, this game is like even now practically. Lewin is still definitely a lot healthier, but the Empire has a lot of infantry, and Bretonnia doesn't have a ton to clear it up, as the peasant bowmen are getting compromised at times, they're getting terrified, and they're starting to run low-ish on ammo.
Franz too, just very slippery this game, barely managing to escape Lewin's charge again, and the balance of power is evened up. A lot of the knights for Bretonnia have fallen, and that cavalry loss is absolutely huge. Still though, if Franz goes down, Lewin's terror will still be able to clear out most of these forces, and as soon as the Bretonnian archers rally, the spears are going to be in a pretty rough space.
Franz is emergency landing again. If Lewin follows, he risks being trapped up, and actually Ice Power is not going to go for it. He's going to pull back, and he's going to look for picks across the battlefield. But man, the Demogryph Knights are both online somehow, and I don't know, man, this is a very tight game, and the balance of power is actually significantly in the Empire's favor at this point, as the cannons are both online and firing, although one is obstructed. The cannons firing in onto the remaining Questing Knights, getting some good damage in, but a cav fight starting in. Actually, I really dislike this play. I think the Empire might be throwing away their lead here, as they are going very aggressively in with their Demogryph Knights onto the remaining Bretonnian cavalry without their infantry support. As the balance of power evens back up again, as one Demogryph Knight terror routes and the other one routes as well. And man, this game is like back to dead even.
Franz actually got shot down by a few peasant bowmen too. Just playing out the war of attrition, keeping Lewin safe, actually managed to eventually kill off Franz without having to take a direct fight.
Yeah, and terror is going to be so punishing in the late game here, as state troops do not have good morale. And you can see they're already at 16 leadership right now before any rear charges even come in. And terror is just going to be such a menace.
Yeah, a single charge in the back will get these spears into terror route range. And from there, it's just chasing them off with the remaining cavalry. Just a crazy back and forth game with both lords taking some pretty heavy losses. But I think Franz hitting the heal cap so early in the game was really what did it. Even though Lewin did get hit up himself, in the end he does continue to regenerate, and just using those peasant archers, like you mentioned at the start of the game, they did manage to stay alive and use up all of their ammunition, getting a ton of value, and that's going to be a win for Ice Power in game 1.
Yeah, it's man, the cannons did actually get great value. Wow. They were online most of the game, but really Lewin winning the single entity fight is what hard carried here. This is kind of the risk. Oh my god, look at the peasant bowman values, actually. Never mind, they're the hard carry. Good lord.
They were shooting Demogryph Knights, Franz, and huge infantry blobs for basically the entire battle. In the end, even though both sides lost their cavalry, Ice Power even trading down on cavalry that battle, the fact that the peasant bowmen were able to just stay operational was pretty big. They even got more value than Lewin, I think. Yeah, with their combined value.
Yeah, and so okay, the picks are coming in, and it's actually so.
Which faction would you like to cover, Doctor?
I'll leave the coast to you, I suppose, and I will go ahead and cover the lizardmen as we. Oh my God, what is this? All right, so throw everything we just said out the window because this is a kite build. At least kind of one. So we have a Croxagore Ancient. What is this build? We have a Croxagore Ancient as the Lord of Choice. Normally it's Islan, but instead we're going to see the Croxagore Ancient. We're going to see a Skink Priest of Heavens with Harmonic Convergence and Wind Blast, I suppose, to deal with any Banshees that might come out. We're going to see a bunch of red-crested skinks, 3 in total. No ROR red-crested skinks, though. Actually, it's going to be 5 regular red-crested skinks, no ROR. We're going to see 4 skink cohorts with javelins. Oh my God, what is this? It's 2 Bastillodons with the Arc of Sotek. So I take that back. This is a rush build, I think. Sacred Croxagore and the Umbral Tide Salamander Hunting Pack RR. What is this? All right, you know what? And then 2 Pterodon Riders with Fire Leech Bolus. Okay, I can't even just go over the coast build.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. For the Vampire Coast, it is much more standard, classic gun style of build, with the backline open, since you don't have to worry about cavalry too much with the deck gunners and handgunner support. A zombie bomber frontline to kill off skinks and saurus alike, with Luther in the sky for the main source of terror, the caster for summons and healing, and a unit, and I think 2 units of scurvy dogs in both forests. But one of them is directly underneath these Pterodon Rider Fire Leech Bolas, and once the game gets underway, the dogs are going to be taking quite a bit of damage. But more importantly than everything else, there is a double Arc of Sotek here, Doctor. The range of that ability, I believe, actually doesn't say what the range is. Oh wait, no, wait.
I'm gonna have to scroll over this is the one that's like a vortex around itself, right? Yes, it is. Okay. This one,
so okay. Yeah, I was incorrect.
I don't entirely understand, but I'm excited. Definitely one of the more wild builds I've ever seen. Honestly, I'm not sure if that's more wild, or the Sacred Croxagore pick, or the 5 regular red-crested skinks without any ROR red-crested skinks against a faction with no armor, really. But we'll have to see. It's definitely wild. I'm very curious to see how it does here.
The red-crested skinks do have immune to psychology for the first half of their HP or leadership, I think. So that is a pretty nice help. They will still have a pretty rough fight against the bombers, but they should be able to shut down the deck gunners and the handguns if they go into the back line. So I'm expecting them to do fairly well. As for the front line, there's basically nothing to punch through that. But how are you feeling about this?
I don't know. The red crested skinks are going to take so much damage from the bombers, and it's like they have relatively low leadership. So as soon as the bomber damage comes in, it's gonna hit like. They might rout or terror rout just because of the shock damage. Luther Harkin is relatively uncontested in this build. He should have a really fun time sitting overhead, sniping out the Croxagore Ancient and the Skink Priest of Heavens. The Umbral Tide is the only thing that can really, even hope to counter him. But we'll have to see. I don't think it'll do a great job, probably, unless Ice Power makes some sort of critical mistake. I'm definitely very concerned for this Lizardman build. I have to say, but we'll see. He seems like he was confident in it when just talking in the selection screen. But who knows? Maybe that was just some mind games.
I think the terror for sure on Luther is a bit of a worry. Really the best way to kill him is to overrun on the infantry front, but that's definitely a bit of a worry given that it is all skinks. These scurvy dogs too will be able to chase off many of the troops and do a lot of damage. And here we go, the Salamander Hunting Pack is going to be firing in on Luther, And we'll see if these Arcs of Sotek actually clear out the bombers or not.
Oh god, the handguns can just focus down the Umbral Tide right now, and if they do, then they're gonna. The deck gunners especially are in range right now, and they will be doing some huge damage quickly. Now, the bombers are firing in onto the Croxor Ancient and the Arc of Sotek, so they aren't getting much damage in at the start, but the Salamander Hunting Pack is already starting to take big damage. One Red Crested Skink is taking big damage on the flank as the Lizardmen are desperately trying to compromise the bombers. And, man, I don't know, this is... It's definitely a pretty solid attack, although some Red-Crested Skinks on the Lizardmen left flank are taking a while to get into the combat, and one Bastiladon is already down, it never did anything. The Arc of Sotek going down on the other side, it's doing some damage. The little Snake Pit is clearing out some pole arms, but I don't know, this frontline attack already seems to be falling apart a little bit.
Yeah, and some of the handguns do get compromised, but we're seeing now some zombies pull back, and the center two handguns are fairly safe given how well things have gone for the front line. The Arcs of Sotek going down pretty quickly too is pretty rough, and this Quaxagore Ancient even, almost down to half HP already. The dogs too clearing up the skinks, and this is looking like a pretty bad situation for the Lizardmen, I think. There's still a ton of zombies, and the snakes for the Arcs of Sotek just not really pulling through in this situation.
Yeah, it's definitely rough. The Sacred Croxagores are doing okay, I suppose, but the Croxagore Ancient getting surrounded here and probably killed, I would imagine, relatively quickly, although it doesn't seem like he's being fired at too much because of line of sight issues. The one Arc of Sotek is still healthy, and it's starting to trot into the back line. But Harkin is getting onto the Salamander Hunting Pack, and with them gone, Harkin is just going to be able to hard carry this game out, I think. I mean, there's really nothing to counteract him at all. It's looking very bad for the Lizardmen right now.
Yeah, there are still a few minor threats to Luther. The Sacred Croxagores plus the Croxagore Ancient could pull in a few miracles, as they do have some pretty high mass, but a pistol summon directly behind the Croxagore Ancient, bringing him down below half HP, and a single charge from Luther or a breath attack would be really rough for him.
A nice breath attack going on to the Arc of Sotek, doing a ton of damage. And now Harkin is going in, he's hornswoggling the Croxagore Ancient, getting a nice charge onto him. 8 melee defense for the Croxagore Ancient right now. Harkin coming in, bullying him, terrifying him, and this game seems already to be pretty much out of the reach of the Lizardmen, although it is worth noting that they have managed to clear through most of the Vampire Count or Vampire Coast chaff. And if Harkin is forced to stand completely alone, then there is a chance that the Lizardmen will be able to grind him out with the Sacred Croxagores.
Yeah, they've been doing fairly well in this fight so far, not having to really run into any pole arms. And if they get a full surround on Luther, things could go pretty well, but a big problem in the backline for the Lizardmen, Scurvy Dogs diving in and cleaning up all the skinks. It's gonna have to come down to these monsters. And Luther with full HP would probably be able to just shoot the Croxagore Ancient to death at this point, even if he does miss all of his melee attacks.
Yeah, and really nice summons coming down now into the late game. The summons, of course, just so critical. They allow for cycle charging, they provide a buffer, they do damage. Just really well timed from Ice Power for sure, really well placed. And, I mean, Harkin is taking some damage, but the Sacred Croxagores are taking a lot more. And once the Sacred Croxagores are down, there really isn't much mass. I guess the Fire Leech Bolus could try and do some damage onto Harkin, given that he has a weakness to fire damage. But I don't think they do really any damage to single entities.
Yeah, especially against the fairly high HP of Luther Harkin. I think they may just run out of ammunition before they can finally finish him off. And there we go, the Sacred Croxagores are now gone. The Croxagore Ancient getting chased off by a few dogs, and army losses are soon expected to be on the way.
A nice summon.
The Bastiladon Arcs of Sotek, we did see, they did manage to dive into the back line. They got in some pretty good AoEs, but do you know how expensive they come in as?
1,000. Um, you pay 350 for the Arc of Sotek ability, and yeah, neither of them paying for themselves, and one definitely not paying for itself. So
Yeah, the Fire Leech Bolas, though, actually a pretty interesting pick, though. They did manage to stay alive quite a while, as the guns had a lot more to worry about. But in the end, not really enough to make up for the loss on the other units. The Umbral Tide, too, dying out so early was really rough. Usually you want to combo these guys with Chameleon Skinks to shut down Luther, or maybe a Tempest. But the Kroxigor Ancient coming in instead, just having a pretty rough time. Usually you just take him for a bit of mass and as a fairly cheap lord. And you know what? I have a theory. This build seems like it was more well suited to deal with Sirens instead of the Vampire Coast build that we saw.
yeah, it definitely seemed almost relatively all in against Sirens, expecting a lot of magic damage or magic ethereal units. Um, but I don't know. Yeah, the only units that really performed up to par were the Fire Leech Bullets, and that was just because they were able to cycle charge deck gunners freely in the back. Um, and I guess the Red Crested Skinks didn't do too poorly. But it's definitely, I don't know if I like it as much as the more meta build of going wide with a bunch of Saurus and Skinks and a Fire Salon. Just I think that might have had a better time here. Um, but I don't know. It's always easy to say in retrospect, and it
For
is
sure.
always cool to see new builds, and you always appreciate seeing new builds. And we've seen quite a few very new builds here today. So
Yeah, not to mention, it did get pretty close to breaking through all of the coast infantry. But there we go. On to the finals now, I think. So, in the ace match before the finals, with Call Harmon versus Chosen One, Chosen One has opted to go Skaven up against Bretonia. And the army is looking like a pretty standard Skaven army. You have an absolute ton of chaff, as is the norm for Skaven. A bunch of rat ogres to pin down cavalry, a single brood horror, some wolf rats to chase off archers, and there should be some artillery. Indeed, a warp lightning cannon to force the engage. There's also a Packmaster, which I missed earlier, the second brood horror, and we've been seeing this a lot for Skaven to snipe out single entity.
yeah,
Skrolk, too, really nice for his AoEs, will really be able to secure any blob fights, and also sniping out things like paladins, but a bit less effective versus the Fey Enchantress, as she does usually bring magic resist. I think I also missed, yes, Poison Wind Mortars also, of course, to kill off Bretonian archers. This is, it's all pretty meta for this Skaven build. So for the Bretonians, what are we looking at?
yeah, very meta again. We have King Lewin Leon Kerr with it looks like actually a beast mage, which is really cool. I like that pick a lot. Manticore summons always good against Skaven, and he's gone relatively cheap on the Cav, so I really like that pick. We will see for the Cav, it looks like quad Knights of the Realm with one Knights Errant, so nothing too expensive. We have a front line of men at arms with a few battle pilgrims sprinkled in indeed. We have 4 peasant bowmen in the back with no, sorry, 5 actually, and 2 with fox arrows, 1 with fire arrows just to kill some regenerating units. And that looks to be about it. So there's no trebuchets, which is a little bit unfortunate because trebuchets would definitely make this warp lightning cannon have a bad time on this particular map. The warp lightning cannon might actually struggle to fire in general, but as the Bretonians will be forced to advance by it, it should eventually get a decent line of sight, I think. We will see the Manticore summons might have a pretty good time here gooning out Skrolk. Skrolk is obviously a very squishy lord with only 3,500 HP, no real resistances, and no mass, so he'll have to be very careful. If he gets gooned out, then that could lead to a mass collapse of the Skaven lines as well.
Yeah, and for the Bretonian side, one thing they'll have to really worry about are these wolf rats, who can dive in onto the archers and take out the main damage for Bretonia. They're also on a timer. They're cavalry, taking hits from the warp lightning cannons, and also the poison wind mortars, of course, taking out the archers is going to be pretty scary for them. And in fact, I think this matchup really revolves around the poison wind mortars. If the Bretonnians can take them out early, they're in a fairly safe position. But if they can fire for most of the game and take out the peasant archers, then the Skaven begin taking the lead. The rest of the army is mostly just supporting that situation, unless of course any snipes come down. So no real skirmishing going on too much right now. It's mostly just these wolf rats and brood horrors just posturing. They want the peasant archers to begin firing on them to buy time for all this artillery to get their damage in.
Yeah, the poison and mortars managing to hit the battle pilgrims. No amount of dodging will save you there. The warp lightning cannon has hit the hills the first couple of volleys, I think, and a really nice dodge actually by Lewin there. But now I am a little bit concerned. The Bretonnian lines are relatively pumped up. There are no gaps in between the infantry units. There's not much of a gap between the bowmen and the infantry either. And the knights are even getting in there. So the poison and mortars might get some huge value with a volley or two here. We'll have to see, though. They will be forced back eventually by the advancing Bretonnians.
And it looks like the mortar shot actually fires in on the knights, but will they be able to dodge it? Looks like they do get clipped, and we'll be taking a bit of damage there.
Not too bad, though.
Brood horrors too, cycle charging, very important in these early stages to maximize the damage on your mortars. But taking a bit of damage on that Packmaster. These archers are very high DPS, and just a few volleys can get a ton of damage in. But that closes off the skirmishing phase. There's been a bit of damage on both sides. And now the main engagement. It looks like the cavalry is staying back. And
Lewin is going in deep.
Oh, jeez.
Wow, he could actually punt Skrulk out and kill him right now. If he goes right onto Skrulk. Oh, but it looks like a really nice response. The Brood Horde is going in. Man, Lewin is in a lot of trouble here, and if he dies, then that's going to basically be game over instantly. The Warp Lightning Cannon even managing to fire in now. Oh boy, he is trapped up. Some Rat Ogres even coming in. He will manage to push his way up, but he takes so much damage there from the double Brood Horde.
If he routes too, that's no more regeneration for him. A shot from the Warp Lightning Cannon, but he just barely keeps it together.
Oh, the other Warp Lightning Cannon misses. Okay. That's still very, very bad. He's going to have to basically sit out for the majority of this battle now and only come in the late game. Yeah, the Skaven are definitely ahead in the game right now, I think. But some Knights getting some decent surrounds onto Brood Horrors could be a nice pick to start to turn this game back in the Bretonnian favor. And the Manticore summons will be really important. If he can goon out Skrulk with the Manticore summons, that would be so important. Or even just a Packmaster would be a great play. And the Peasant Bowmen are starting to get worn down by the Poison and Mortars, who are firing in quite happily. So that's definitely not ideal for the Bretonnians.
And one major problem, Lewin actually does get routed off in the distance. That's no more healing for him. And he won't be able to participate much, but the Packmaster does go down to the Manticore. And the Archers trying to focus down those mortars that's actually gonna take a while. I'm a little bit worried for Bretonnia now.
I am very worried for the Bretonnians now. The Rat Ogres are even busting through onto the Peasant Bowmen, and Chosen One, even though the balance of power doesn't really say so, has a commanding lead in this game right now, I think. The only way I can see the Bretonnians actually coming back into it is if a Manticore summon manages to snipe out Skrulk, but I don't know. Skrulk seems relatively protected. The Knights are all getting worn down, the Peasant Bowmen are all routing, and Lewin is basically out of the game, as the balance of power is now swinging into the Skaven favor.
Yeah, just getting constantly shot by that Warp Lightning Cannon, and the huge surround is really unfortunate. The cavalry, too, for the Bretonnians is now routing off, and they won't really be able to chase off all these Skaven units. They're rallying, and they'll be able to... There is one unit of healthy Knights of the Realm, but I don't think they'll do too much against these Brood Horrors.
Yeah, I don't see it really happening, and Skrulk is going to manage to escape from the Manticore summon with half of his HP still remaining, which is more than enough to uh, to stay alive at least, and that's really all he needs to do is stay alive and summon. Even the Damsel of Beast starting to get compromised, although she has no more spells, so it doesn't really matter. Uh, some Peasant Bowmen starting to come back online in the back. I don't know. The balance of power is relatively even, but it seems like the Bretonian should be relatively far ahead. But if this Manticore manages to snipe Skrulk out, that could be huge. Um, it needs to go in right now, and it will.
Oh,
Will it get? Oh, it punts him but misses. That is so unfortunate.
oh, yeah, that was really the play that the Bretonians needed to pull out the victory here. Their healthy cavalry were actually pulling in decently well, but Skulk is an absolute beast in combat, and if you surround him with cavalry, just in a straight up fight, he will come out on top on that fight. There was a moment where his leadership was about to break too, but now at basically full leadership, this is almost assuredly a victory for Chosen One now.
Yeah, I talked a lot about how much I like the Manticore summon idea, but the problem is that you can't use Lewin very aggressively with that because he doesn't have the regrowths to babysit him, especially with Liber Bonicus. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It basically just came down to Cal Harmon accidentally throwing away Lewin there. I don't know if he was going for a snipe on the scroll, and he just microed it, or if he just forgot about Lewin for a second. But it was a pretty critical error, and unfortunately, that's going to lose him the game. It was a good job by Chosen One, though, definitely capitalizing on it very well. He managed to turn all of his focus onto Lewin, goon him out very quickly, and with that, take a decisive lead in the game.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a risk that his troops would get shot by archers in that situation. I was a bit worried, but it seems like the positioning of the archers was just a little bit too far away by the looks of it. And there we go. That's going to be the game. Going on to Chosen One. Uh, yeah, with that big Lewin pick, like you mentioned. Looking at the value of the archers, they still got pretty decent value despite the loss. They are very high DPS. The front line managed to pull through too. And even the cavalry did pretty well, but looking at Lewin, 88 damage value, he basically only got a single attack off by the looks of it. Really rough, and on the Skaven side, pretty expected numbers. Skulk doing really well, Mortar's doing really well, and the Warp Lightning and Rat Ogres, basically everything trading for about its value. In the finals, up against Ice Power, Chosen One has brought the Greenskins against the Dark Elves, and it's going to be triple Stone Troll, going very elite on that front. On the monstrous front, Brom the Paunch, Giant River Troll Hag coming in with just a Spirit Leech, Night Goblin Shaman with just Vindictive Glare. That's going to be a pretty big threat to Ice Power's usual Manticore style of play. And as predicted, a ton of skirmishers, going with the mix of Spider Rider archers and Wolf archers. Will be really nice against any cavalry, and generally don't get hard countered by too many things on the Dark Elf side. They'll likely be trading into probably Scourge Runners by the looks of it, and for the mainline army, it's going to be some pretty cheap actually, a mix of goblins, orc boys, fanatics, of course, big guns, actually just basically one of every infantry up to the big guns, and some forest goblins, spider riders, just as a decent way of chasing things off, but they won't be winning too many fights against the Dark Elf cavalry. So with that out of the way, what do we have for the Dark Elves?
Well, we do indeed have Ice Power's build that he has been taking for a few weeks now. It is Marathi atop her Hellsteed type thing. We have, I guess it's a Pegasus. We have 2 Feral Manticores. We have quad Scourge Runner Chariot, a bunch of Dark Riders with shields, 4 in total, a Doomfire Warlock. Actually, it's not the Doomfire Warlock ROR, which might be a slight adjustment. I'm not sure. And then we have 2 Dark Rider Repeater crossbows in the back. So definitely a very Scourge Runner focused build. I would say kite focused, but honestly, it's pretty much all about the Scourge Runners in this build. The Scourge Runners and the Goon Squad. Definitely some very powerful units there, but they're gonna have to do the heavy lifting for sure.
Yeah, and specifically against the Stone Trolls by the looks of it. If they can get their shots off on them and get them to rout, that would be huge. But the main problem for Ice Power is these Scourge Runners might just be trading out into the Greenskin Skirmishers for most of the game. And if that keeps up, the Stone Trolls really don't have too many threats, right? It's honestly just Marathi and the Manticores plus Soul Stealers to win out the blob fight. And that's definitely pretty significant. A lot of these skirmishers trading out into these Dark Riders too can work out for Ice Power, as it does buy a bit more space to kill off Stone Trolls.
And not that much damage. Okay, not that much damage. I'm not sure if he overcasted that. It almost seemed like he didn't, which would be really surprising. Maybe some of the missiles missed. But, yes, definitely Vindictive Glare is quite spooky onto Marathi, but I tested it and it doesn't do as much damage as you might think, just because she has both missile and magic resist. Even so, over the course of the game, the Vindictive Glare spam could wear her down, but I'd almost like to see it more onto Manticores, just to rampage them into the Greenskin lines, and from there you can kill them very easily. We are going to see another Vindictive Glare, and it will do another 300 or so damage. So it's definitely doing damage, but that can be healed back up with Soul Stealer without many issues. And you can see the Greenskin Skirmishers are dying quite quickly here. They're not having a great time, and a Soul Stealer is going to go down and hit a few units, only like 3. It'll mostly heal Marathi back up to full, though.
Yeah, and but the skirmish fight is actually going pretty well in the favor of the Dark Elves. The cycle charging with cavalry, and specifically these Dark Rider repeater crossbows, have traded pretty well in this case. But the Scourge Runners are at half ammunition now, and all the Stone Trolls are still at full models, I believe. So far, I think Chosen One might be feeling a little bit more comfortable, but honestly, it seems pretty even all around.
Yeah, the problem is once the Stone Trolls are gone, the Scourge Runners can just cycle charge the infantry to death, no problem. And Grom is not going to be happy if he gets surrounded by the Goon Squad here. That's kind of why I'd really like to see Chosen One snipe one of the Manticores, just rampage it into his lines and kill it, because it suddenly you can't get a full surround on Grom anymore, and it becomes so much less threatening. But he is focusing on Marathi, who is full HP, but eventually, over the course of the game, her heal cap will appear. And so definitely Chosen One with this very defensive play, playing the long con. You can see the Scourge Runners are down to about a quarter ammo, and they haven't done much, but one of the Stone Trolls actually way overextending, and this is quite a critical mistake here.
Yeah, diving straight out of the defensive formation. Getting fully surrounded by cavalry, and that's a really big loss, especially considering that another unit of Stone Trolls is already pretty low on HP. It seems like I might also be lagging out just a tiny bit, but I am the one recording, so the YouTube stream would actually be pretty straightforward. The Stone Trolls do get routed off, and they might be able to come back, but it really depends on which direction they actually route. There's also a huge leadership break in the center of the Greenskins, and that one misplay from Chosen One is getting punished extremely hard here, especially if these Stone Trolls get routed off.
I have to imagine
really
they will.
bad.
Ice Power is a very solid player, and I can't imagine he would allow these Stone Trolls to come back. Man, I don't know what they were chasing. I guess the Scourge Runner is very unfortunate. And that's definitely huge. However, the Greenskins still do have quite a bit of HP, and they have a couple Stone Trolls left. But man, they are gonna kind of struggle, I think, in the late game here. Now you can see a gooning attempt starting to go down as Soul Stealer goes down, Soul Blight goes down, and man, the Greenskins are gonna lose a lot of troops here as they're just getting full surrounded and picked apart basically.
Yeah, and those Stone Trolls too. The skirmishers can't really stop the chariots from chasing it. since they're already so beat up themselves. And at this point, it's just trying to reconsolidate the forces of Chosen One. The ammunition is almost out for the Dark Elves. 2 Soul Stealers have gone down, so at most I think it's 1 or 2 left before the end of the game. And if Chosen One can survive those last 2 Soul Stealers, then things would start looking up. But the fact that this Goon Squad is still so healthy is definitely a pretty big problem.
Yeah, the Dark Rider repeater crossbow is getting in some really nice damage onto the Stone Trolls. And if he's able to take out the Stone Trolls, like I said, the 4 Scourge Runner chariots, they might be missile chariots, but they still do extremely well against infantry. So, I don't know. It's going to be rough. Wand of Jet going down, actually, by the Night Goblin Shaman, trying to get some Winds of Magic, presumably for more Spirit Leeches, is quite an interesting play. Now, you can see nice cycle charging from the Dark Riders, and the Dark Riders themselves even doing really well, just cycle charging, getting free damage and pulling back immediately before any kind of counter charge can come in. Very solid stuff, and you can see, actually, it's worth noting, Murderous Mastery or Murderous Prowess has gone down. It's essentially being wasted, and that's actually really nice for the Greenskins if they can delay the engagement until it goes away. However, Ice Power, seeing this, pulls the trigger and goes in for this huge flank overload and a big Soul Stealer onto this blob with a Stone Troll and like all the single entities. This is basically going to be the game-deciding play. You can see the Manticores trying to surround Grom, Scourge Runners coming in from the back. The Stone Trolls, though, are relatively stable.
And yeah, if they are able to hold, that would be pretty good, but one of them does get routed off. And specifically Grom too is sort of singled out. I believe he's procced his buffs to make sure he doesn't take too much damage here. And if the Greenskins can hold, that would definitely be good. They'll be able to take out a few units of cavalry and chariots. But that might just be it. Marathi and the double Manticores are still at basically full HP. And another Soul Stealer in the future, in the very late game, is going to be really punishing versus the remaining Greenskin forces. Not to mention, the infantry in the distance have also been getting picked apart by the cavalry, and that's a unit of Shattered Stone Trolls. How do you feel about this situation for Chosen One?
I think it's really rough. The problem is that he has to blob up if he doesn't want to get picked apart and terror routed, but if he blobs up, then Soul Stealer is huge. There's still not much ammo on the Dark Rider repeater crossbows, but there is enough to do some chip damage on these few remaining Stone Trolls. And once the Stone Trolls are down, it's not like Grom or the River Trollhag are really going to be able to carry against the Marathi Double Manticore Goon Squad, let alone all of the cavalry. So I think this is pretty heavily in the favor of Ice Power right now. We'll have to see, though. It's possible if he manages to get a pick onto Marathi that he'll win the game. But yeah, I don't know. Chosen One is definitely in some serious trouble.
Yeah, it would have to be a full surround on Marathi with all the heroes and the trolls, while tanking that Soul Stealer too. Now, a Vindictive Glare, it looks like it got targeted on the Manticore, might have been cancelled. And man, honestly, those Manticores at basically full HP is really rough. They're nowhere near rampaging into this blob.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. Now, Vindictive Glare is going down onto the one Manticore. Ice Power trying to dodge, kind of fruitless. Vindictive Glare has some amazing tracking. And it's chip damage, but man, they are still so healthy. The Manticores are still so healthy, and Marathi is full HP. And with all of her debuffs and all of the terror, I don't know. I think this is going to be really difficult.
Oh wait, now I'm going to have to come back in a quick second. I got something in my eye, but I'll keep looking at the army. So,
sure.
Let us know how it goes down.
So you can see these goblins are starting to waver even before the Scourge Runner chariots are coming in, and they will come in for a charge. And I think actually, so the Vindictive Glare goes down. The Manticore is going to be rampaged, and that's the go button. Everything coming in all at once for the Dark Elves right now. And the Manticore is coming in, pushing the Stone Trolls out, and a huge Soul Stealer hits everything. Oh my god, the Soul Stealer just doing unbelievable damage as the Greenskins are starting to collapse here. You can see mass routes, and I mean, I just don't think they can possibly deal with this single entity goon squad and this excellent surround by Ice Power, who has just completely picked apart this greenskin build. And it looks like he's going to be taking game one of this final, as all that's really left now is Grom and the River Troll Hag, who are decent combatants, but not really against the kind of units that Ice Power has remaining. And they aren't that strong that they're going to be able to kill this much, I think. We will see. It's not completely over yet. The balance of power actually is not even that one-sided, but it's definitely looking quite rough for the Greenskins.
Yeah, honestly, I think Grom, he needs to get some really lucky hits against the Manticores, which looks like that might actually be playing out. One Manticore is routing off, and the second one is on the verge. These big guns with the Spirit Leech will likely be going down, but if they manage to hold, with all this regeneration, I think Chosen One might have a chance. It really depends on how well Marathi does here.
Yeah, another Spirit Leech going down onto Feral Manticore and managing to rampage it, and it's off doing I don't even know what, but I don't know. He needs some like really lucky hits from Grom onto Marathi, I think. Marathi doing a really good job actually of fighting the River Troll Hag right now. And you can see that all that's really left over here for the Greenskins is the leadership squad, and their leadership is not that good that they can win this kind of situation. The River Troll Hag is routing, the Night Goblin Shaman's about to route, and with that, I think Grom is soon to follow. As, yeah, man, a really nice play from Ice Power. It's the same build we've seen a few times from him now, and it seems to be working really well, as he's able to just pick apart pretty much any greenskin he's come across.
Yeah, and quite decisively too. I think there were, well, there were some misplays from Chosen One that could have helped there. Specifically, I think those stone trolls that got picked off was really rough, and also those vindictive glares on Marathi were really ineffective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I was pointing out earlier, I think he did eventually start to target them onto the Feral Manticores, but I think he needed to do it a lot earlier for that to have any real impact.
Yeah, and we saw with Marathi, she was nowhere near getting picked off for basically the entire game, thanks to those Soul Stealers, which means that all that Winds of Magic really just did not pay off in the end. So there we go, just another really nice win from Ice Power. No real misplays to really speak of either. Just very well, yeah, very well played, and a solid showcase of the build once again.
I'm okay with counterpick. I'm okay with either side here. I kind of like counterpicking Empire into Skaven, but not that much. It's there's a lot of different build diversity too. Speaking of which side would you like to go over here?
Let's switch up the teams now, and I guess I'll start with Ice Power. Coming in with the Empire against Chosen One Skaven. Both players had selected preset builds in this matchup, so should be very exciting. As we see, Ice Power has come in with 4 Knights of the Blazing Sun. Very elite cavalry, very prone to getting picked off, but if managed correctly will be very punishing. 3 units of Empire Knights and a pretty cheap frontline of just Empire Spearmen, with a hero core of a Bright Wizard and Volkmar. So all in all, this is a full melee build, and we'll see how that plays out against the Skaven build of Chosen One. What are we seeing?
So for Chosen One, we are seeing 2 Gutter Runners, one with Poison as a sort of vanguard force. We have 5 Skaven Slaves in the front line. We have, it looks like 3 Clan Rats, including 1 Clan Rat Spear, and 2 Plague Monks, actually, a very interesting pick in the back line. We have triple Rat Ogre, double Brood Horror, Deathmaster Snicketch, and an Assassin. I'm missing something here. Okay, there we go. I was going to say he did not come in with no magic. It's a Plague Priest with the usual summons. So, honestly, I'm really concerned for Chosen One here. I think that Ice Power's build is actually very well suited for this task. The shock damage from 6, or no, a lot more than 6, it's actually 7 cavalry, is going to be pretty oppressive for this relatively squishy Skaven army to deal with.
Yeah, Skaven usually they they expect Empire to go for a lot of range units and infantry, which is why they might sometimes opt for a rush build like this. But against a rush of the Empire, Skaven are definitely a little bit more scared, and oh my goodness, a big burning head on those Plague Monks. That is already 300 gold off the bat at the very start of the battle. Pretty nice pick as the game gets underway, and already we're seeing the cavalry really showing their advantage.
Oh, it might go into some clan rats too.
Sorry?
No, it barely misses them. The burning head almost killed a unit of clan rats, but barely missed. Now this is going to be very, very straightforward. It's going to be, I'm going to smash into you, you're going to smash into me, and we'll see who wins. But I don't know. The double brood horror is going really aggressive. He needs to be careful. I think he needs those to pick off Volkmar, honestly, together with Snickich. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be really hard to deal with this mass amount of shock damage coming in from the Empire right now.
Yeah, one important thing about the brood horrors, though, they will be very good against the cavalry and Volkmar, but fireball spam on top of them does absolutely insane amounts of damage. If ice power begins fireballing those brood horrors, that's basically all the single entities for the Skaven, aside from Snickich and the assassin.
Oh, that burning head is so juicy. It's going down the entire Skaven front line on that flank and collapsing it instantly. Oh my god. You can see the Skaven formation is just collapsing completely. Now, the Cav in the back is getting into the back line. Radogre's there to peel, but the Brood Horrors are going to need to super hard carry this game, and one is already wavering at half HP. Snickich is trying to get onto Volkmar, but Snickich does not kill Volkmar like that. It's not like he's going to do that much damage. And a Fireball, as you called, going into the Brood Horde, dealing a quarter of his HP in a single shot, and one Brood Horror is already routing off. His ice power looks to be taking a decisive edge in this game.
Yeah, that frontline collapsing. Although there's no guns to really protect for the Skaven, they really don't want to be fully surrounded. The leadership debuff is way too much for them, and we'll be seeing a ton of routes on that front. And as for the back line, the Knights chasing off that Brood Horror, there's enough space where it might be able to rally. But just by the looks of it, it seems like the builds have really not worked out for Chosen One in this match.
Yeah, a really nice, like, super aggressive rush build coming in from Ice Power, and Chosen One just not having the mass and the HP really to deal with it. Now, another Fireball going down, doing a ton of damage to another Brood Horror. Now you can see that the Empire is starting to slow down a little bit. They are definitely still winning, but as the game goes on, they are losing a lot of models on their cav, they're losing all of their infantry, and the one Brood Horror has come back into this game, so the Empire is going to need to effectively use shock damage and morale debuffs, and especially magic, as you can see another Fireball into the Brood Horror. Man, this Bright Wizard has insane amounts of magic, it seems, as it is just hard carrying this game.
Yeah, just fireballs and burning heads getting value on both fronts. Brood Horror routes off for a second time, and Snickich is basically alone, stuck on Empire infantry. He definitely can't snipe out Volkmar at this point either, and just because of that crazy HP and the regeneration. And another AoE coming down means that that's basically it. Just these two heroes are the main threats for the Skaven now. Getting surrounded, and they'll really have to pull a miracle to kill off Volkmar at this point.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, it isn't even Volkmar, it's everything else. This is really unfortunate, honestly, for... Oh man, that is a lot of damage.
Yep.
This is really unfortunate for Chosen One. He definitely did not expect a build like this. I didn't even know if Ice Power expected Chosen One's build, or if he just happened to choose a build that was extremely good into it. But yeah, either way, this looks to be like a very decisive finals. As Ice Power, man, he has been like the king of these tournaments lately.
Yeah, absolute clinic. Just, oh my goodness. Yeah, I think he was expecting a different build from Chosen One, and then just how the dice ended up rolling. Just a pretty rough matchup. Chosen One's build would have been pretty good against a very defensive, artillery-focused Empire style of play, but in that case, just really walking into a bad situation. Quickly though, let's just take a look at the value on this Bright Wizard at 1700 damage value.
Honestly, it felt like more than that.
I think so. I think I was expecting somewhere in the mid 2000s, given that he basically killed off Snicketch and routed off 2 brood horrors, including all the damage he did to the infantry. But in the end, you don't have to kill off a full brood horror to get it to rout. The leadership debuffs were really enough in that situation.
So Chosen One calling a rule break. Not. I believe I think that changed.
Okay. What's up? What changed?
He's under the impression that Knights of the Blazing Sun are max 3, but I'm pretty sure they're max 4 as of a couple months ago.
Well, let's go ahead and double check on the banner rules. 4.04 Knights of the Blazing Sun are max 4.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we were talking about Rust earlier, and maybe this is one example of it not quite keeping up with the rule changes.
Yep. And there we go. Yep. It's max 4. Let's see the rules that I does it say on the thing? Does it link to the incorrect Google Doc?
Let me take a look.
Even if it does, yes.
Yeah, you have it linked to
a wrong
4.03,
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Yep, that is my bad, but nevertheless,
I do believe there is a disclosure that it's the latest banner rules.
Yes. Yeah. So anyways, with that out of the way, I'll just close this off for all those watching on YouTube. Ice Power has managed to take another victory for the tournament today, and they can you inform Ice Power that he did get the win and that we are using 4.04, Doctor? Thank you very much. And yes, so Ice Power has come out with another victory. Indeed, chat, you guys are on YouTube, but your text sadly won't be appearing. And yes, thank you very much for everyone who has come in to watch. Hopefully we'll have another one of these tournaments within about a week and a half.